the existing rail line around the bay. And in the event that that option becomes available to use rail, there could be some kind of a compromise where the trail system could work, it could be adaptive. You may recall that suddenly we found San Francisco busing people up from their jurisdiction, truthfully caught them putting people on a bus. We called it Greyhound therapy, and it was because of a board break or whatever the reason was. I fired off a letter to the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, which prompted immediate responses from some of their board members. Although I would say some of it was politically motivated, because there are always differences of opinion on that board and the mayor's office. But in fact, we were able to stop that, and they've expanded it. I thought, well, that's wonderful. You want to use local talent, you want to offer them the opportunity to move into a field where they're needed, and they're really great paying jobs.
As part of our series of in-depth interviews with candidates for Humboldt County Supervisor, the editorial board of the Humboldt Sentinel sat down with incumbent 1st District Supervisor Jimmy Smith here at Has-Beans Cafe just a few days ago.
Hi, Jimmy. Mark.
What's up? How are you?
I'm okay, I think. I just admittedly a little bit overwhelmed here lately.
So where do you rate like the revitalization of ports in that part of the county? Like as far as the importance of your district, of our district, my district too, I guess.
Yes, it is your district. Well,
I mean, do you think it's gonna create a big, do you see an immediate spike in tax revenue being brought in if fishing is revitalized and the accommodation is there for prospective fishing businesses?
Well, I can tell you from the fishing perspective, my understanding, and I'm out, but I'm still in. In fact, I have some things coming up on the board agenda to talk about the potential transfer of allocation for what's left. The trawl fishery's been really narrowed down. It was buyback programs, mostly self-funded by the fishermen. But there's also a proposal on the table to allow transfer of catch quotas to other permit holders in other states, which may not only just affect the viability of the local fleet here, but the infrastructure, because the fleet's been minimized, salmon, crab, tuna, and trawl, that there's, you have to have some infrastructure left, the ice companies, fuel companies, the costs that are spread out amongst all of the boating public and commercial boat users within Humboldt Bay. If you lose any portion of that, then you compromise the ability of those businesses to stand. So it's more or less trying to maintain. I don't think you'll ever see a spike. Oh, brand new fishery, more boats. All of those. In fact, I worked on some of the limited entry programs, or limited entry fisheries. Doesn't mean nobody can get into them. What it means is, just because you have a strong fishery in, let's say, Dungeness crab or bottom fish, that you're not going to have boats from Alaska or Washington coming down here to take advantage of a localized fishery here. They're limited in their participation through legislation that the industry carried forward. So there's going to be long-term stability. In fact, over time, more of those products, I think, are going to be like you see with, let's say, dairy, for example. Creamery products, expansion of markets across the state and across the nation. Look at cheeses, which are immensely popular here now. And look at some of the cocoa palau, look at wine inflatables. Those are things that are going to expand, and there's potential to use other transportation mechanisms. Don't need to be in. As far as the port participation. When I was on the Harbor District, you remember quite some time ago, I was part of the latter part of the EIR when it got finished up, and then the deepening project took place as the only opportunity to be able to access the 65% funding to deepen the port, so that it was ready for whatever type of commercial activity, industrial activity would be accommodated in those areas that were already specified in zoning. Other things like the new boat ramps and parks and the restoration of the South Spit, which used to be a huge homeless community with garbage and gunfire over my head, things like that that have been restored and now accommodate every type of recreational activity. Those are there to enhance tourism, work with the Leatt tribe and Leo Animal, Cowfishing Game to make that happen, and ultimately put in things like our dream, the Interpretive Center, and property that's been acquired out on Bluff, the old lighthouse man.
You know, I don't know. I mean, it's for me, it's kind of, you know, as much as I'd like to see like the port developed, I just think that, you know, sort of this push that exists to bring in these, you know, big, huge container ships is sort of unnecessary in a way. I just think that the port, as it stands now, is potentially viable for, you know, potentially viable to produce just using sort of what's here and taking what we have here and just utilizing what currently exists. Am I wrong there? I mean,
well, I think that when we looked at the management plan for Humboldt Bay a number of years ago, the idea was to look at setting aside certain areas for protections of natural resources. And part of that was related to what we just talked about, trying to sustain commercial fisheries. You had really important commercial fisheries nursing areas, including some of the mariculture operations with oyster raising. Those types of, I think, look into the future and see what areas you need to set aside for conservation of natural resources and enhancement even. If you look at the importance even for Humboldt Bay as a nursery for Dungeness crab, it's unbelievable. The bottom in certain areas will be carpeted, which is Dungeness. So there's a worth to that as they recruit into fisheries, and then all the related employment for what's going to happen with seafood production and all the employment. But also on the peninsula and over on the deep water side of the city of Eureka, what businesses could we make sure that in the zoning we emphasized existing, and people could pull up information from the GIS system, which we had worked on several years ago. They could look at if they wanted to participate in some kind of option for a business, like they have over in the area adjacent to the Harbinger, in fact, with Dock B. Then they knew exactly what the zoning was and what they could present as an option when those properties became available. The same on the peninsula, although a lot of that's privately owned, there still are properties that are viable for some type of commercial activity.
the roads coming out from the Lost Coast, coming from Honeydew through Petrolia to into Eureka even, or even into south of Ferndale there.